But most of all, we're pleased to have so many of you from away who have battled between snow and fought your way between sand and stars to get here to celebrate tonight's honorees, Eric and Ines Zeller, who are right here down here. We have a delightful and heart-filled evening planned and a full program of people to hear from. So let's get started. First on the program, I'd like to welcome Jerry Smart, Vice Chair of the Vermont Arts Council, to give a brief overview of the Governor's Award, including the criteria and the process, etc. Jerry?
Thank you, Rob. This is the Price Waterhouse part of the evening. Looking for my notes, I thought, oh, maybe I'll write them right here. Each year, the Council solicits nominations to receive the award for the general public. The Council's nominating awards committee reviews the nominees in the spring and approves a list of the 3 candidates and then sends that list to the Governor. The Governor makes his choice during the summer, and the Arts Council then works with the Governor's staff and the artists on identifying the mutually agreed upon place and time to have this wonderful presentation. The Council is currently accepting nominations for next year's awards, and if you go to the website, you can find information on that, or talk to any of us here at the Vermont Arts Council. We're very, very happy to talk to you further about that. The criteria is as follows. They must reside in Vermont. They must have made a significant and sustained contribution to the advancement of an art form. They are recognized for his or her contribution in an international, national, or regional area. They demonstrate a personal commitment to the development of cultural life in Vermont. They demonstrate exemplary standards of professional integrity. And for at least the past 10 years, this is kind of a neat thing, the awards themselves have been produced by glass artist Robert Birch of Brandywine Glassworks Studio, which is also located in Putney, Vermont, where our award recipients are from. So that's exciting. I think that is it from my part. Hello.
Thank you, Jerry Ann. So now we get started. It's a pleasure to welcome Richard Edelman to the podium. Richard is a theater and opera director, a founding member of the Living Theater, and a founder of the theater program at Penn State University. He has one of the longest associations with St. Glass Theater, having served as a guest director for St. Glass Theater productions since 1982. I think your last one was in 1993, is that correct? He still works with St. Glass as a directorial consultant, and in his words, St. Glass is the first company that challenged him with the task of directing puppets. Richard.
I'm here as a historical artifact, really. Having known Eric and Ines probably longer than anybody else in this room, isn't that so? Yes. And Eric and I first met under the auspices of Jean Erdman, the famous choreographer dancer who had a remarkable theater in New York, in Yorkville, New York. She with her husband, Joseph Campbell, a mythologist, had established this theater, and Eric was doing remarkable puppetry work there, and I was the associate director of the so-called New Works project. And at this point, Eric invited me to his studio. And his studio was down in an abandoned area of New York on Chambers Street, which has since become, not at that point, Tribeca. And is, of course, very like Soho, which preceded it, became a place where artists lived, and that's because they were pioneers like Eric who went down there and moved into an old commercial building which was built about the same time as this room here. And I remember entering this eerie space. It was dark and dusty and filled with all these projects and grandiose projects he had in those days too. Gargoyles and vast ghostly birds that filled an area almost this big, at least in my memory. I'm not very theatrical, perhaps it wasn't this big. But it was an enchanting experience. And he was putting together, at this point, his first and his breakthrough piece, a piece that put him on the map in this country and in Europe and indeed throughout the world, Autumn Portraits, which was a solo piece, and many of you may have seen it because it's still going after all these years. When did you last do it?
Thanksgiving.
And I used to collect the royalties for that. I haven't anymore, I guess it ran out. Give me a chance to remind you. I got what I had to. No. And we worked on that, and I felt really I was only a consultant. You may remember that I said, hey, I don't want to be called director, I want to be called consultant. But he stuck to his guns, and I turned out to be the director on that piece. And it was really the first time I had worked intimately with puppets. And one has to be intimate with puppets. Why? Because Eric says to a puppeteer, that puppet's not breathing. Well, in order to hear a puppet or feel a puppet breathe, you have to get very close to it. But what it really meant, what it really means, that moment of breathing is establishing the connection between the puppet and the puppeteer. That's an incredibly important connection, where the energy that's flowing from the whole focus of the mind, the body, the soul, the spirit, you name it, of the puppeteer into the puppet. But a strange thing happens. The puppet returns it. And much that you see in the work that Eric and Ines do is based on that connection. And as their style has evolved, and it has evolved over the years, they have been led more and more to let you into that connection. That's part of the magic of what they do, is that you participate in that, and you see that that message that may be going out from the puppeteer to the puppet is being returned. It comes back. It's quite a phenomenal experience. And there is a spectrum. Tell me when I got that. There is a spectrum in puppetry that goes all the way from these marvelous, enormous, gigantic sheets that are puppets that represent one idea. You see them in parades and that sort of thing, and they vivify crowds, and they make important statements, and we feel patriotic, and we feel, oh yes, that's the truth, I'll give my life for that. And that's all that puppet says. Just that one phrase, that proverb or something else. Or you go through to where puppets personify some aspect of human behavior, like Miss Piggy, something as brilliant as Miss Piggy, where she personifies just one thing, moi. Nothing else. But she does personify, and she is what we would call a three-dimensional puppet. And then you get to the other extreme, and this is the extreme that Ines and Eric work at, where these puppets have, for want of a better term, souls. And you're aware of it. They have memory, they're conscious of themselves, they have psyches, they have a spiritual life, and they have a dimension that is indeed human. And that's quite remarkable. And it doesn't matter what size they have, because they work in many sizes, and sometimes it's a little confusing. You're working with this little one and with that big one, and somehow they belong in the same world. And indeed they do. They do. There's something very surreal in their imagination. And that's very, very exciting and very refreshing. They're not stuck in naturalism or stuck in realism. They can play across the whole spectrum of artistic expression, and they frequently do. I think the little piece you see tonight will show you some of that, where they move from one level of reality to another very easily. Then, I should say just a couple of other things. After the establishment of autoportraits, and then Ines came into the picture, and Eric's work began to change enormously. It was very interesting. She brought a sensibility that was different from his, and to watch over the years these two people meld into a single creator. And I'm working with them right now on a piece, and I haven't worked with them this deeply on a piece in some years. And I find, though I know them intimately in a familial way, because we know each other for well over 30 years, and we know each other's children and all that sort of thing, I find I'm working not with two people, but two people combined as one. And their work shows it. And I wish I had the time to go through just the Heaven trilogy, which was the big trilogy that we did in the 90s, from the time they went to Munich until the time they came back for a few years here in Vermont. And their style evolved during that period. And somehow, and this wasn't self-conscious on that part at all, it was autobiographical. Now, I want to tell you, all art is autobiographical. I mean, the moment you pick up something to express something about life, it's coming from your point of view, and there's no escaping it. And it resounds with who you are, whether you like it or not. And if you try to withhold that, it stops being important art. It just becomes some kind of illustration, and that's it. Well, they don't withhold nothing. They really don't. And that's part of the thrill of experiencing what they do and of working with them. You know, I always look forward to it. And I know I have to stop now. Thank you.
To introduce to you the evening's first performer, and not coincidentally, last year's Governor's Award recipient, Rob Murray. You probably all know Rob. Rob is a mime and circus performer and founder of Vermont Circus Smirkus. He has collaborated with Sandglass Theater and Gemini Trapeze to create Between Sand and Stars, which toured Norway and France in 2005 after, I believe, debuting here in Kentucky. So, Rob Murray.
Okay. A little story of Eric and Ines. A soap-sudsy romance. Or you might call it a soapy opera. Eric flew off to Germany when he was a young lad. Here he is. And there he met the ravishing Ines. It was love at first sight, but before any words passed between them, they immediately kissed. And maybe they rubbed together a little bit. And then they became as one. And some said that their romance was very, very erotic. Others said it was very volcanic. some babies.
From that time in France. Now, what town was it, Ines, where there was this large double-decker merry-go-round? Remember that? What town was that in France? Carousel. Was it? It was France. I think it was France. Yeah. Well, anyway, here's what it looks like. This award that they're receiving tonight is so well deserved, and I feel very proud and I'm honored to call you friends and colleagues. Mazel tov.
If you're not careful, Rob, we'll think of reasons to bring you back year after year after year for this particular event. Our next speaker is Finn Canton, coming up to join me here on the podium. Finn came to Sandglass just after college and developed his talent and skill as a puppet artist working with Eric and Ines. He toured with Sandglass throughout the 1990s to Europe and Israel and was involved in the creation of 3 Sandglass productions before founding his own puppet company, Company of Strangers, in Westminster West, Vermont. Ben?
So we're somewhere in Germany, and I have no idea where, and we're driving around and we're trying to find a small theater where we're going to perform. Details are fuzzy. All I know is that the load-in area of this particular theater was through a very, very narrow archway. Very little room on either side. We had to fold the mirrors in of our big red Mercedes double-decker van, and that the clearance between the top arch was minuscule. And we drove in, and we got through, and we felt really good about ourselves because we managed to get through without crashing the car, and that was good. So we unload the 17 cases of the sound and the lights, and we load everything in, and we set up, and it takes us 5 hours to set up the show that takes us an hour and 10 minutes to perform, and then 3 hours to strike. But that's okay, because we're puppeteers. And we're in Germany, and it's great, and we're really hungry after setting up 5 hours, and go back out to the van. We get into the van, and we turn the van around, and then we realize that we've taken the show out of the van, and now the van is too high to get out of the archway. And that was the moment that I realized how heavy puppetry actually is. And I'm so very, very pleased that the state of Vermont has realized how heavy puppetry is and has decided to make Sandglass Theater the recipients of the Governor's Award for Excellence in Arts. This is great news. And I'm very proud by this. I'm so pleased. And I love Sandglass Theater, and I miss it. And I love Eric and Ines. And one of the things that's so important about what they do is that they are truly committed to committed to that, to making the theater that'll change people and to change themselves. You can imagine that when I came to Sandglass in the early 90s, and I wasn't a puppeteer, and I had some craft, and I was building and thinking with them, and they actually were listening to my ideas, which was kind of extraordinary, and that those ideas became sort of part of the ensemble. Because Sandglass Theater is an ensemble theater. It's a theater that gathers the forces around it to make its work. So the performers have a voice, and the music obviously has a voice, and the stage and the set has a voice, and the objects and the puppets themselves have a voice. And all of these come together under the guidance of the director, be it Richard or Eric or a guest, and that is the work that happens. But there's a commitment in that work to another presence, which is the presence of the witness or the audience. And this is why live theater is so absolutely essential, and why Sandglass has been producing live puppet theater for so many years, because that connection with the witness is so important. You can imagine, that you have an object and it's teetering on top of a ladder and it's swaying there and the wind is wrong and the object, the puppet, right, is falling. And it takes this indescribably slow amount of time until it finally is left onto the floor of the stage. And all it is cloth and wood and paper, and the transformation isn't in the slow rise back of that object as it brushes itself off and looks up to where it fell from. And the transformation isn't really in the focus of the manipulator as they bring, as Richard said, right, brings the breath into the puppet and makes everyone sort of believe for a moment in this object. And it's not really in the audience either who's observing this and willing to believe, but it's in all of those aspects coming together that some incredible transformation actually does occur in live theater. And Sandglass has been transforming space and time that way for a very long time. And I really do hope that this award will help allow them to continue to do that for many, many more years to come. So Eric, Ines.
What he was talking about is what makes my job as director of the Arts Council so difficult, because as artists, people like Finn, people like Eric and Ines, have the wonderful opportunity to actually show why the arts are so important. I usually end up having to tell it third person. That you should have seen the show I was at last night. You should have attended the school program. You should have done with what everybody in the know was doing, which is go to this performance or that exhibition and enjoy and experience for yourself this incredible moment where that transformation that Finn just talked about actually happens. I'm well aware that our next guests are slowly but surely covering me up. And I just said, the real me, the small man in the back of the room. That too goes with the territory of being the director of the Arts Council. So imagine, if you will, that I'm still standing here talking away while I introduce Bonnie Hall and Jamie Keithline, who formed their award-winning company in San Francisco in 1982 and have delighted audiences across the nation with their whimsical humor and puppetry. Now residents of Halifax, Vermont, they continue to tour throughout the U.S., performing in schools, museums, and theaters. They are frequent performers at Sandglass's Puppet Theater and are collaborating on the next Puppets in the Green Mountains Festival, set for this coming September 2010. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I've spent just almost about the right amount of time.
You're doing a great job.
to introduce Crabgrass Public Theater, and if you will just bear with me, this will give me time to get out and do it so I can see what is happening. So, ladies and gentlemen,
We did want to say this is a piece that we created especially to honor Eric and Ines tonight. They asked us to perform, and we said, oh, we couldn't possibly. We don't have anything we could do. And then we thought, unless this is a piece that was inspired by a section of their most recent production, Ballad. A piece in Ballad where all kinds of intense, meaningful, deep things were happening underneath a set of roofs in a small Vermont town. And this is about the intense things that are happening elsewhere.
Good morning, and welcome to today's edition of An Eye on the Sky. Are your doors getting hard to open? Is your ceiling starting to creak? Excess snow load is the leading cause of winter house collapse in Vermont. Your roof won't shed all by itself, so you'd better get out there this morning because there's more snow on the way. So go out there and make it a great day.
is part of the identity of the greater Brattleboro community. So it's a pleasure to welcome back to this podium, it seems like old times, Mara Williams.
The introduction is a bit misleading because I actually met Eric and Ines about 18 months after I moved to Brattleboro, which was 1989. So I met them in 1990 to 91. I'm not sure the exact date. And there was a wonderful storyteller who used to live in Brattleboro. Her name was Mary Sinclair. And I struck up a friendship with her, and she said, we have this great puppet company that is up in country on Christian Square, and they're trying out some new ideas. And I think you would very much like this work, the things that you've said. And would you come with me on Saturday? And I went up and I found out where Christian Square was, and not stained glass theater that you all know, their old house down on Christian Square. They opened some barn doors up, and they had, in a very Vermont tradition, little logs that they put up on end for us to sit on. And they had been working on the village child. And I had no expectations. It was puppetry. It could be One Raku, it could be Miss Piggy, it could be anything in between. I was curious. And even in rough production, I was transported. It was a miracle as far as I was concerned. I just fell in love with the work that they did. It had a sensibility that was absolutely unique. The puppets were not highly refined. They hinted at something that was both structural and ephemeral at the same moment. And it talked about a world that was completely interior, but expanded to include the world of ideas, the world of aesthetics, the world of vaudeville. I couldn't believe how it ranged through philosophy and popular culture all in the same instant. I thought, who are these people and where did they come from and how did I get so lucky to be invited here today? Shortly after that, Eric joined our exhibition committee, and we cooked up an idea. Wouldn't it be nice if we did a puppet festival? Eric had been involved with one of my predecessors in bringing international puppetry to the Brattleboro area, but it hadn't been done in a number of years. And we worked on a grant that the Clues Foundation gave us to see if we could raise enough money and have enough interest from the international puppet community to come to Vermont. We also contacted Senator Leahy's office because the visa issue was just beyond anything that I've ever done before. And by hook or by crook, 18 months later, we had those grants in place. And then I was introduced to the most far-ranging work, from children's work that was charming and profound and disturbing all at once, to adult work that was wrenching or inspiring, and adult puppets that were this big, theater for adults that had puppets this big, theater for adults that had puppets this big, and the most delightful company of artists that I have ever been in. I have worked in the theater, I certainly work in the visual arts a lot, and perhaps it's because I've worked in both, the blending of the visual arts and the performing arts that puppetry embodies was so special. It spoke to my soul in a way that is profound. And having the collaboration with Eric as our artistic director, the curator, as it were, of our festival, also allowed me to be invited into a remarkable family, a family that spans 2 generations. Little Shoshana was a little puppet herself when I met her at the first puppet festival in Paris, and come back from Poland, and she had a traditional Polish costume for traditional Polish dancing in the museum for the Party for the Artists, the opening of the puppet festival. And I thought, this child is a miracle too. How is it that this family exists in our hometown, and then we opened up a theater, and we produced more puppet festivals, and I can say without exception, I think that Eric and Inez are the most wonderful artists I've ever met in my life in any field, and I am honored to be here today.
Thank you, Maura, for those wonderful words. Our next performer is one of the country's best-known mask artists. And if you think about it, it's not surprising that masks and puppetry tend to go hand in hand. Larry Hunt is a longtime friend of St. Glass and a favorite performer at the biennial Puppets in Paradise event at the Hayward Gardens in Westminster West, Vermont. As you might expect, the imagining, designing, and creating masks is an art form very closely tied to puppetry, and Larry's Backward Boy is a beautiful example of this connection. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Larry Hunt.
Thank you very much. I've known Eric and Ines for quite a while too. Much longer. And I want to thank you for inviting me here because I feel greatly honored. I work with puppets often. Most of the time, I work with masks. And masks are really heavy too. I want a real quick anecdote. I was performing. Oftentimes, I'm introduced when I do children's shows as a puppet show. And one day, I was performing this puppet show in the Boston area, and there was a young kid in the audience with his father. And I was introduced to the puppet show, and I gave a mask. And the little boy turned to his father and said, "Daddy, where's the puppet?" And I did another mask, and all this time, this little boy kept jerking on his dad's arm, saying, "Daddy, where's the puppet? Where's the puppet?" Finally, the father turned to the boy and said, "You see that man wearing the mask? He's the puppet." That's why I get to come here.
Cambodia Living Arts, an NGO whose mission is to restore Cambodian arts that were nearly destroyed in the genocide of the Khmer Rouge. John helped link sandblast with the Cambodian Arts Association, Savannah Phum. I probably should have pronounced that. Okay. This international collaboration resulted in The Story of the Doll, which toured in Cambodia and the American Northeast in 2006. John and Eric are now working together on a town committee to help the Putney Historical Society develop a plan for a performing arts space in the former United Church of Putney. So,
good evening, everybody. Beautiful evening. This has been, indeed. So my name is John Burns, as Alex has said, and I'm the very lucky resident in Putney, Vermont, to be, along with all of us who live in the area of this great toolbox theater and international performing arts company and great people, Ines and Eric. I've just returned from a trip to Cambodia just 4 days ago, and was where I've been working, as Alex mentioned, for the last 12 years, helping to revive the cultural traditions of Cambodia that were nearly brought to extinction after the reign of the Khmer Rouge during the 1970s and 1980s. And nearly a decade ago, Eric and I met and talked about his visiting on one of my delegations of artists and educators to Cambodia. And we envisioned together the possibility of Sandglass as a Western puppet company coming together with a traditional Cambodian company that was just emerging in their tradition of ancient shadow puppets. And what I didn't realize at the time, that being young to Putney myself and new to Sandglass and Eric and Ines, was that a proposal of an idea or a possibility of something emerging as a thought or a dream, in fact, already had become a reality in Sandglass's mind. That is to say that if you share an artistic vision or an idea with Sandglass that resonates with their core mission, that they're already designing the opening scene of the show. Last week, just about this time, I was standing with Sandglass's Cambodian collaborator, Kassal, the founding artistic visionary and genius behind Savannah Phum Arts Association, in a hot, dusty, rusty, metalworks part of an interior working neighborhood of Cambodia's capital, Phnom Penh. Kassal had just finished building a new outdoor stage and seating for his company, who had to move from a more central location, much easier to get to, because of the radical rise in real estate costs in Phnom Penh over the last several years. He was pleased to see me and quickly asked for his Vermont family. Where are they, and when are they coming back? As I stood with Kassal next to his long, bright, painted flatbed truck that toured the Sandglass and Savannah Phum companies around Cambodia, countryside, performing The Story of the Dog, almost a half-decade ago, he told me that his company had recently performed the show again. He seemed proud and sheepish at the same time. He smiled then and said to me, "We were meant to do the show together. It belongs to both of us," he said. Eric once said to me, in the midst of financial concern about how to travel the company to Cambodia for that trip, he said to me, we were talking, and he said, "But I told the Cambodian company we were going. We have to go." You have no idea how important that statement is to every single performing artist and artist of Cambodia, and probably every artist in the world. They have faced such a profound, the Cambodians face such a profound loss of a generation of artists and workers of their culture, that they had stopped hoping or dreaming or imagining a future. And just to think of what it would take for an artist to create a work without an imagination of their future, without an imagination or a thought of the unknown, For indeed, that is the job of every artist around the world, is to face into the unknown, and to dream, and to imagine, and to create anew. So just as Savannah Poem and Arts Association is in the middle of its industrial neighborhood, in the middle of Cambodia's capital city, so is Sandglass Theater right in the middle of our downtown Putney. Behind what was a village tavern, next to what was the center church, and across from what will soon again be the Putney General Store. The 20th century saw the loss of a great many small downtowns across the United States. And I think that as we step into our first decade of the 21st century, we still are confused and scrambling to understand who we are and how we challenge ourselves to redefine our communities, how we recreate our employment, our cultural identity to maintain the integrity of our towns, of our villages, and of our communities. But for 30 years, for more than 30 years, Putney has been home to this preeminent international theater company and ensemble whose roots grow wide and far, but whose artistic integrity is rooted in the small town values and the expression of individuals in their communities. In the words of the Cambodians, I will speak their language very poorly for you. Silapak kwe che simong, yil trumak patro, nonu nieng seng kugum shun. Art is the cement that holds the individual and society together. Eric and Ines and Sandglass, you have been practicing in the art of saying, yes, we can, for a very, very long time. And our community and state are more resilient because of you. So we thank you and we are grateful.
It is now time to welcome back the governor to the podium, into the House chamber, for his remarks and to make the award. Will the Sergeant at Arms please escort the governor into the chamber?
During the 8 years, it's been my privilege to make this
award included 2 musicians, a sculptor, an author, a folklorist, an illustrator and cartoonist, a circus artist, oh, gave you away, and now 2 puppet artists. Vermont, as you may know, has the highest per capita population of writers and the 7th highest per capita population of visual artists. But even so, there's no doubt in my mind that, based on my own experience, that we host world-class artists in virtually every artistic discipline. Maybe our vivid scenery, our tranquility, our small, close-knit communities that attract such creative talent to live here, but it's the artists themselves who play such an important role in maintaining our intimate connection to our communities and to our distinctive quality of life. Ines Zeller Bass and her husband, partner, co-creator, and co-recipient, Eric Bass, fall in a long line of distinguished Governor's Award recipients stretching back 43 years. The first recipient, who was the famed pianist, Rudolph Serkin. So I'm pleased to be here tonight to honor them and to make the official presentation. If you dare, Eric and Ines, would you make your way up? Whereas Eric Bass has worked in theater as a director, playwright, performer, mask, and puppet maker. Whereas Eric Bass has taught theater and directing at Marlborough College in Vermont from 1996 to 2002, and has received international awards of distinction from puppet and theater festivals in countries ranging from Hungary and Germany to the United States and Australia. And whereas Ines Zeller Bass has performed with puppets since 1968, child puppeteer, primarily creating works for children, and has toured extensively throughout Europe and America, and since 2000 has broadened the creative output to include works for adult audiences. Whereas Ines Zeller Bass teaches residencies in puppetry in Vermont schools and has given professional training workshops in Japan. And whereas Eric and Ines founded Sandglass Theater in 1982 in Munich, Germany, moving it to Vermont and opening a 60-seat theater in Putney Village in 1986. Since then, they brought critical and artistic acclaim to themselves, their collaborators, and to our state. Whereas Eric and Ines continue to inspire new performers in and draw new audiences to the puppetry arts by directing an annual puppet theater training institute at the University of Connecticut and directing the biennial Puppets in the Green Mountains Festival in Brattleboro. And whereas they received the Citation Award for Meritorious Service to the Arts from the Vermont Arts Council and a Senate concurrent resolution honoring their work from this General Assembly. Now, therefore, I, James H. Douglas, Governor, do hereby proclaim that Eric Bass and Ines Zeller Bass are the recipients of the Vermont Arts Council's 2010 Governor's Award for Excellence in the Arts. On behalf of all Vermonters, Eric and Ines, thank you so much for what you've done, for what you continue to do, and for making Vermont the incredible place it is to live, to work, to raise our families, and to nurture the arts in every form. Congratulations.
being here. We're totally blown away by the number of you who came from our neck of the woods up here tonight. This is nice to see the rest of you, but it's really, really impressive. Everybody made a try. So, thank you. We have a few words that we thought it was probably appropriate to say about what we do and why we do it. So we're going to do that. and we'll take it. So, Governor Douglas, members of the Senate and the House who are here, representatives of the Arts Council, fellow artists, and fans. Back in 1978, when I was a young pup, the theater. That's the only point in the whole. Before there was sandglass, before I met Ines, I was working for the Theater of the Open Eye, which I told you a little about that. Gene Irvin was the director, and her husband, Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, was a moving force. And we did a tour in upstate New York, and we found ourselves playing the Zen Center in Rochester. In the entrance to the temple, there was this huge Japanese drum. It was a huge barrel with a large skin at either end, suspended in the air on a tall rack. And a monk was playing the drum, something like this. So I got very excited, and I said, "Ooh, can I do that?" So the monk very generously gave me the sticks, and I started pounding on the drum as hard as I could. At which point the monk stopped me and he said I was doing it all wrong. So I said, "What am I doing wrong?" And he said, "You are hitting the skin of the drum." So I said, "So what should I do?" He said, "You play through the skin. Through the skin at the other end of the drum and out into the world. That's the way you should do it." I never learned how to do that. But years later, I understood that this was actually one of the keys to how we would teach puppet theater. We believe that the audience, whether they know this or not, actually does not come to a puppet show to see a puppet. They come to see through the puppet and into the puppet's world. They come to experience the puppet's world, which is a reflection of our own, through the awareness of the puppet. So as puppeteers, it's not actually the puppet that we are playing. It is the environment that we are bringing to life. And our main tools are our breath and our imagination.
When we experience the world, we breathe it in. Everything that we take in with our senses, we also inhale. It's right, it's true. And even when we dream, when we are asleep, we are inhaling a world of our imaginations. So if we can do it when we are asleep, we can do it when we are awake too. We imagine the world of a puppet, its light, its temperature, its familiarity. And we let the puppet breathe it in. The hard work is to really experience this imaginable world. And then to let the puppet actually experience it as if for the first time. Our training involves linking our breath to the puppets, letting our hands work not as active doers to the puppet, but as soft listeners to the objects we hold, so that they can respond to our imaginary environment. This is for us a contradiction of all the myths about puppets being controlled by puppeteers. Think of expressions like puppet government or playing someone like a puppet. We work to not control the puppet. We work to support it, soft receptively, but to never grip it or hold it in a controlling way. If we do that, the scene we are playing becomes a scene about the manipulator, about us, and not about the puppet or its world around it. Or it becomes a scene about the conflict between us and the puppet.
So our work is the work of letting go, of releasing. And we have found this to be often very difficult. Performing for us is the act of letting the puppet carry us through the scene. And I think that some of our musician friends experience the same idea, letting the music carry you. We train, and then rehearse and rehearse in order to be skilled enough to do nothing. Or at least to do nothing that gets in the way. The thoughts that we think when we are performing need to be the thoughts of the puppet, not our own. Or, as we say, we think through the puppet, not for the puppet. This is a kind of game, but it's a very serious game. What is at stake in this game is whether or not the puppet will come to life. We watch our grandson play games with his imagination. His favorite these days is superhero. And he is very serious about this game. He has an incredible costume that Ines made for Christmas. He hasn't taken it off since Christmas. He does not want adults to tell him that what he is imagining is not there. As performers, we have the responsibility to take our games seriously, even as we let you, the audience, know that it's only a game.
Remember that we are doing a play. We are puppet players. It is the same word that we use for what children do when they get together. It is the same word we use for what musicians do when they pick up an instrument. It is the same word we use for athletes who play golf. We do this for our entire lives. We are responsible for keeping the play in life. We are also responsible for engaging the audience, even the adult audience, in this game. As puppeteers, we can't even say that we animate puppets. Ultimately, it is the audience who does that with their imaginations. We make the invitation through skillful gesture, to connection to a richly imagined world, to our focus and our commitment to our play. But we can never allow the game to be exclusive. If it does not let the audience play with us, we are not doing our job. So, our job is to include, engage, and play with you. And to remind you that this playing together is something that creates community between us, between you and the rest of the audience, between you and your children. Sometimes, this play will make you uncomfortable, but that is also part of our job. It is part of our dialogue as we create community together.
We understand puppetry to be a theater of action and images, not a text-based theater. Puppets at their best, we think, when they do not replicate something that could be done better by a human actor. It is this otherness from real humans, even when they portray people, the puppets that is, that gives them their ability to comment on the human condition. Puppetry is the theater of metaphor. Through metaphor, we get distance to our personal problems, and we see them as problems of humanity. This is what interests us, and this is what keeps us working in this art form.
Although Sandglass has a 20-year history, surprising longevity, every day, every year, feels like it could be our last. Last year, we came very close to packing up shop and locking our doors. Then, surprisingly, several doors opened with support and affirmation, including, yes, this award. We are committed to this life as theater artists and puppeteers. We have to work every day to learn to play beyond the skin of the drum, to inspire others bring artist voice to our communities, we have to keep pounding. And by this we mean the year after year training that brings maturity to our craft. By this we mean the networking that develops our field as a whole, that creates a lore and knowledge among artists. By this we mean the essential work of integrating art and community in the same way that communities integrate their farm stands and bakeries. By this we mean the weaving of our own identities with the greater identity of the places in which we live.
So as we accept this award, we recognize the work that the Vermont Arts Council has done. We appreciate the support that we have received, even in lean years. We appreciate this award, and we see it as an award not only to us, but to the art of puppetry, and to all artists and the arts as a whole. We would like to work together to bring these arts, these performances, to communities that are perhaps more skeptical about arts. We have to win over communities that are struggling so hard to survive that arts seem like an unnecessary luxury. Imagine performing spaces throughout the state, all wheelchair accessible, all managed by programmers who make sure these spaces are used and do not stand empty, all integrated professional performers and local arts programs, all sustainable. This has to be a partnership among artists, communities, funders, government, food providers, and land use conservationists.
We as puppeteers are proud to be Vermont artists. We are happy tonight to be among many colleagues, Vermont musicians, writers, theater artists, clowns, craftspeople, painters, and puppeteers. Together we are all part of the culture of this state. To see us as part of a vibrant network, to see us integrating the communities around the state, to see us collectively defining and ever redefining the recognizable quality art identity would be great. That would be yet another way of playing through both skins and out into the world.
And that's what we have to say. Evening with a sandblast piece, we want to add our own performance voices to the voices of our friends who perform tonight in our honor and for your enjoyment. We really want to thank everybody who came to speak on our behalf. We want to really thank the performers who got up here. It's not a paying gig. They couldn't resist the room, I think. So it's going to take us a minute. We want to bring Nick Kyle up here, who's working with us, and give you a scene from our new piece, All Weather Ballads, a piece called Mud. Give us just a minute.